that's what NASA's actually changing the way they talk about risk, taking into account time.
Right.
Because time sensitivity of risk is as important as probabilities and consequences. So that's a new way to think about risk. You'll probably see more about as you move forward in your careers.
In the case of the Payload Operations Center failure, we took that into account. It's not a large risk unless it's in the showcase, because during the showcase, that's when we really need the Payload Operations Center to work. So we'll do some pre-testing prior to the showcase. However, if the POC fails at a later point in time after the showcase, then it's not too much of a problem because we have backup data and we already have photos of different well flares already in recorded.
And do you have an availability number that you work towards? Do you know how many hours of outage you can have over the life of the program?
For the Payload Operations Center failure, we can have at most 85% operation time completely functional.
Okay.
While for the ground terminal failure, we can only have we have to have 98% functionality. So there's a great difference between how much functionality we need for the ground terminal and how much functionality we need for the Payload Operations Center. So aside from that, we also have a failure to, there's also the likelihood that Green Gasco may be unable to obtain a license for a geo-orbital slot, in which case we plan alternative orbital positions. So potentially 2 HEO orbits, right?
Correct, right. So 2 HEO orbits focused over North America should give very consistent coverage at least half of the day, or close to half of the day. Problems include the sensor having to go through a lot of different atmospheric conditions to read the well flares. So it would maybe take a little more sensor development, but it's a backup option that is very viable.
What are you going to do to mitigate that risk?
We're going to begin design of the HEO orbit satellites, just to keep it as an option until we see how the licensing for HEO are going.
Now your GeoBird is part-time doing comm work for me, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And you can solve the problem of looking for wildfires from the GeoBird. What are you going to do about my comm? I mean, I'm giving you a lot of money for my comm problem. Is the HEO solution going to?
So we can actually, by playing with the orbits a little bit, we can get the satellite or the HEO satellites in just like opposite orbits. So one will be over North America and then the other. So that'll still give you full coverage.
Of North America, but I won't be able to communicate with South America from a GeoBird.
It's true. So to get full comm.
For all of my money back is what you're telling me. If that risk, the HEO is not a solution for my problem, and I'm giving you half your money.
Did you run any budgets to see if you could link to Brazil?
Yes, our main MOC in Colorado Springs will be able to relay transmissions down to South America.
Okay, I got a problem here. If you're going to go with those options, and I was talking about is my comlink, my concern is your ground systems are going to have to be modified, aren't they, to handle a HEO-bird, because now you're going to have to point and track versus your GeoBird, which is you just point. So how are you going to absorb this cost, make sure I get my job done with your ground terminals?
That's the great benefit of using custom ground terminals. We get to customize them to fit our
But
specifications.
you have to modify them now, because prior you just could point, now you don't have to track.
We can delay the pointing mechanism or making that design decision for the ground terminals until we have a better idea of the geo orbit licensing.
I'm going to expect a cost increase in
Well, in addition, there's a little bit of wiggle room in the initial $100 million that we got to initiate the ground terminals and the ground operations center. So we should be able to get it under budget or within the budget.
And in your statement of work in the contract, who's responsible for this licensing of the GeoSlot?
Green Gasco is responsible for the licensing of the geo-orbital slot.
So does that mean we're liable if we don't get it for the extra cost for this HEO vehicle solution?
It would. We're going to work with you guys to try to get that through as quickly as possible. We have a lot of experience getting geo orbit, both frequency licenses and spot licenses and stuff like that.
So did you write that support into the statement of work?
Yeah.
what's it gonna cost me to replace in the final version? Suppose I want to watch these forever. Satellite orbits decay and satellites lose functionality. About how often am I gonna have to replace a low Earth orbit satellite?
So the LEO satellites, for FOC, we'll have 3 functioning ones. Their lifetime is about 7 years, so you'd have to replace, they're kind of staggered, so it's not all at once, but yeah, you'd have to replace 3 every 7 years.
What's your end of life cost for this system?
Or
So-
IOC or FOC?
Actually, well, I would assume we're going to be controlling this issue eventually. You're not gonna have any methane being released because it's gonna go against regulation. So eventually this, what will come out ahead is in the midterm, but in the end, there's gonna have to be end of life costs to shut down these systems, perhaps. Have you considered that?
Sure. So in the long run, Green Gas Co. may not necessarily be responsible for putting up a whole satellite system forever. That responsibility could pass to an organization or government that wants to enact those legislations. But if Green Gas Co. does decide to keep that as a side business, or subsidiary of Green Gas Co., and keep that data under their own control, then there'll be a cost associated with the LEO and GEO replacements.
So with every risk, there are opportunities. And our first opportunity is that we can host a launch since we own the rocket. And this allows us to give you discounts with our final price. Another opportunity that Green Gas Co. has is that you can become a front runner of clean energy. Because when the public knows that Green Gas Co. is taking initiative to monitor their own well flares and make sure that they are not producing methane and making sure that the environment is well taken care of, Green Gas Co. will be considered a front runner of clean energy. In addition, since Green Gas Co. is in the front running of green energy, it's highly likely that the government will invite Green Gas Co. to help facilitate new regulations and work in future legislations to make sure that the environment is well taken care of and that less methane is being produced by well flares. And finally, Green Gas Co. gets to be ahead of the competition because odds are the trend is that environmental awareness is increasing and Green Gas Co. competition does not have the same green friendliness that Green Gas Co. has. And with the additional satellite monitoring system, you could be even more ahead of the competition when legislation passes and the environmental laws become present.
With adequate experience and incredible heritage, Kerbal Space Industries is a reliable and outstanding enterprise in our industry. As you may have seen, we deliberately establish schedule and carefully consider all the risks and come up with mitigation strategies. Assistance from military will further lower our risks. Having cost risk as a first criteria in our trade studies, we will have the cost of Trans-America communication drastically reduced. And this is the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So real quickly, Dr. Burns was kind enough to model up some HEO orbits for us, so we can show you what that looks like. And to your question about comms traffic over South America, we could have a link between the two. We also have the option of adding in extra satellites to add functionality 24/7 comms on South America.
So this will show how, when in the orbits, these specific satellites will have or contact or line of sight with the ground terminals that we have in place. If we can get it to run.
Maybe those light button, bottom left.
It's like,
What, for these sort of, what's perigee and apogee, how far in,
For the
Yeah.
Geo orbit, the elliptical orbits.
how low did they go, how high did it go?
These ones are about 400 kilometers, I think. They normally can go up to 600 to 800, I think, on the perigee. The apogee is 25 to past geo orbit, so over 40,000.
So in fact,
Altitude, right?
you
Yeah, yeah,
can see, you have a close view for a really relatively small part of the orbit.
yeah.
I mean, since you go whooping by, like Kepler's third law, you wander out there in the darkness for ages and ages before you come back.
So the viewing time is actually the high end of the orbit. Right. So the longer time, the high end of the orbit is 12 hours, give or take.
They spend about 10 hours in the northern hemisphere.
Exactly.
And so that quick turn right around by the Earth, well, that won't be when we transmit our data back. That won't be when we image, because we'll be moving through a lot of atmosphere, and the image quality will be pretty bad then.
So if the orbit's 12 hours, you get basically one view per day of, say, the Gulf of Mexico with one satellite.
You get a 12-hour window over, if you put the high part of the orbit over the Gulf of
I
Mexico.
mean, the Earth, one side of the Earth is available now, the other side of the Earth is available 12 hours later, and then back to the first side is going to be.
Yeah, the dwell time on the low side though is pretty short. It's an hour to 2 hours as opposed to 12.
So you probably get 20 hours out of 24 of coverage of North America from the two planes.
So the east.
If they were off, if they were,
You have to adjust the phase.
yeah, if you, yeah, phase.
I'd be curious to see what that looks like if I'm the sensor.
It's not good.
Gotta do both at the same time.
Seems fine.
well, let's just do the fun one.
Yeah. So the one on the left is the view from the sensor, so you can see as it plunges towards the Earth, or close period.
So this is how many hours?
This one's the dwell time. That was like the 12-hour dwell time, and now we're coming in for the quick approach, which is about 1 to 2 hours. So we move quick underneath South America, and then we'll come out for another big dwell time of 12 hours.
Are there any interesting well flares on that side of the Earth that you could look at?
So Siberia is one that we've considered, and the east orbit, or apologies, the west orbit we're looking at now actually does go past it.
People were talking about drilling, North Polish stuff until the oil prices collapse. It'd be nice to have the capability to keep an eye on those guys. You can't from Leo, of course.
Good analysis, Steve. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I think we'd like to caucus as the customer team for 5 minutes. If 5 minutes is sufficient?
I said 5, I don't say 10.
Yeah.
We'll return to